You can see the statistics there. About 1 in 5 individuals have learning and thinking differences, and basically their brain is wired differently. They process information differently, and where some of the difficulties come in is when they're trying to bring this information together in terms of certain topics like reading, mathematics, writing, and speaking. Sometimes these difficulties and challenges are called learning disabilities. There's also related disorders like ADHD. But learning disabilities, if they're defined and diagnosed, really do have an impact on how a child learns to read, write, do math, computations, and or speak. And a child may have one or more of these types of challenges as they go through school. Unfortunately, some of the kids that come to us have a little stigma attached because they have been called lazy, they've felt that they're different and or stupid, and so what we see is that they have low self-esteem and self-confidence, and that can be a side effect of kids that have these learning challenges and don't receive services if they need the services. In general, children and adults with learning disabilities have average to above average intelligence, and they can do quite well if they learn strategies and approaches so they can compensate for their learning challenges. So without further ado, let's look at some of what they have to deal with. Learning difficulties or learning disabilities can affect a child's academic achievement and self-esteem. In a lot of cases, parents feel that there's a gap. They know that their child has potential. The child knows that they have potential, but something is getting in the way of getting to that level of achievement that they really desire. And so what you may often see if you look down the left side is that there's uneven development of language, of physical development, perception, social skills, emotional maturity with kids that deal with learning disabilities. And it can, as you see on the right side, affect quite a few areas. Language processing. A number of children that have this difficulty have a hard time understanding what they're being asked. When they're asked a question, you can see on their face that they're trying to decode that and trying to figure out, what am I being asked to do? And so the teachers that work with them really need to understand, what their challenges are so they can work with them. They also have trouble in a lot of cases understanding sounds in language, and then putting together their thoughts when they want to speak to someone or converse with someone. With dyslexia, reading is a big challenge. They're not sure what certain words are. They don't know how to decode sounds when they're looking at spelling. Phonics can be difficult for them. Trying to figure out what the word is. They get confused between letters like D and B and P and Q when it comes to writing them. And then also in terms of sounds, D and T when it comes to listening, and F and V have similar in their mind sounds, and they get confused. What you'll see a lot of times with people that struggle with reading is that they will not be reading fluently, and by that I mean quickly or at a pace you would expect without making mistakes. They can struggle with reading, getting through the sentence, getting through a paragraph, and then have a problem with comprehension and not totally understand what they've read. But if someone reads that same paragraph back to them, they have no problem with the comprehension. So there are some challenges there. Math, what we see in math, a lot of the kids that are at the school have a hard time with concepts like greater than, less than, equal to, positive numbers, negative numbers. A number line is confusing to them at times between positive and negative numbers, and then decimal places. And then when you get into more sophisticated math, which I call algebra with 1 and 2 step, let's say 2-step equations, that's even harder for them. And then with reasoning and decision making, sometimes our kids and the kids that are dealing with these challenges, when it gets more complicated, have a hard time deciding what's the first step to go through in the reasoning, and then how does that progress. And sometimes they're impulsive and they will make decisions without always thinking through the possible consequences. Also, they're affected by how, organizational challenges. How do I get organized for my classes? In general, what I've observed is girls are much more organized than the boys. And that's whether they have executive function challenges or not. Girls seem to be on top of that. See, in terms of attention, focus, and memory, if kids are challenged, for example, in an area of writing or reading, they tend to shy away from those subjects. So it's harder to keep their attention. It doesn't mean they have ADHD or attention deficit disorder. They may have a challenge staying focused on those topics that are challenging to them. We do have some kids that have some very critical memory challenges. You may teach them one day something and you almost have to teach the same thing the next day. And it's hard for them to have a concept become concrete. And then, of course, there's the social situations and self-control, which often goes along with kids that have not only the learning disabilities, but challenges like ADHD. Now, this is my favorite slide of the presentation because these are the kids at the school, and this is pre-COVID, so there's no mask. But what I've learned is that these kids that learn and think differently are really a blessing. And what I've observed over these 15 years is that these children work hard, they're creative, they're empathetic because they all know that they're all working on something. They all have a challenge. And that's what we as teachers and staff tell them. Hey, we have our challenges. We're working on this or that. So they're very empathetic. They're caring. By and large, they want to do well. They want to achieve. Juan, who's the boy on the left, he's been there about 3 years. Julian, about the same amount of time. They both went up to junior high this year. Next to Julian is Sol, and she's Juan's cousin. She just started. So the good news spread from Juan's mom to Juan's mother's sister, and now Sol's part of the group. And then we have Evelyn, who's been in junior high for a couple years, and she's moving back up to Maine, where they're from. And then on the right, we have Oscar, who's in our prep class, and then Hannah, who graduated and is now at Bishop McLaughlin High School. So those just are some of our kids. They're pretty happy for the most part. They get to hang around with kids that they can relate to, and they have and are learning ways to compensate for their learning challenges. Types of specific learning disabilities and related disorders. The first one has to do with math, dyscalculia. It's hard to remember all these terms, but there are learning disabilities, specific learning disabilities that are diagnosable related to math. And in a lot of cases, it has to do with basic math facts. They cannot remember that 6 + 2 necessarily is 8 and memorize that, but they can count it on their fingers or they can use a calculator. So a lot of our kids will use calculators because we want them to have the tool that they need. Dysgraphia is more of the ability to write legible letters and numerals. It's the ability to not only store, but to retrieve quickly letters and numbers when you need them. A lot of times, the kids that struggle with this, their letters and their numbers are not that legible. It's hard on them. You'll see them have difficulty getting that pencil right in their hand. They'll sometimes use pencil grip, something to make them feel more comfortable. What we found in this case, the kids that have difficulty writing with dysgraphia, Once we went into iPads and got some keyboards, they did quite well. But actually working with their own motor skills is difficult for them at times. And they can also have challenges with executive function tasks like planning and organizing. The big one is dyslexia. A number of kids and a number of people have dyslexia, which impacts their ability to read and to perform language-based processing skills. They struggle, a lot of these children, with word recognition, decoding sounds, decoding words through breaking them into syllables. It's harder for them. Of course, that can impact spelling and then also reading comprehension, because if it takes them a long time to read something, then they can almost forget what they're reading about. They're just struggling so hard to read. There are also oral and written language disorders that affect kids and affect their comprehension. There's some where the kids and the children don't understand, like I said, what they're being asked. There's some where they don't understand the sounds that they're hearing, and they're trying to decipher the sounds, so then it makes it harder for them to figure out what's being said. There's an expression written disorder or expressive written disorder where I remember a student last year who went from junior high up into high school. He could give you the best description of a story in the world. He was an avid reader, but if he had to write a paragraph about the book that he had read and he could tell you about 5 ways from Sunday, he would sit there and it would be torture for him. And then when he did it, it would be done quickly, not in the best manner, just to get it over with. And so while he came in late to our school, we did the best we could to get him ready for high school so that he had some kind of strategies to work around that. And then we have nonverbal learning disabilities where some of our kids have a hard time understanding facial cues. Is something okay? Is it not okay? Have a hard time with body language. They may get too close to you. They may not understand space. They can have poor coordination. Some kids have a problem with balance. They have a problem with hand and eye coordination. It's very difficult for them. Some have what's called visual spatial challenge, where they can see things, but they don't always know how close they are. So if they wanted to cross the street when a car is coming, that could be a challenge. They don't know, do I have enough time? Is there enough time? Is this close to me? Is it not close to me? From my standpoint, I have that challenge when it comes to learning dance moves, and that's another sign that people are asked to look for, is ability to follow directions when it's a visual type direction. I personally have that problem. Now, ADHD affects between 3 and 5% of the kids in the US. I'm sure you've all heard about that. It is a challenge that a number of our own students have. They do have this thrown on top of their learning disabilities, and that makes it harder because they can either be hyperactive and impulsive, or they can be inattentive, or they might have the combination of the two. And so it can be very different from one moment to the next on whether they're engaged, not engaged, how to keep them engaged. And it's a challenge for the teachers, a challenge for families. Once again, has nothing to do with intelligence, but it's the way that their body operates. There's also a coordination disorder called dyspraxia. Has to do with making it more difficult to control your muscles. You'll see that a lot of these seem to be related in some cases. In this case, it might be that someone has a hard time writing between the lines or drawing between the lines with their crayon, using scissors, things of that sort. And then executive functioning is basically the major processing center of the brain that has to do with time management, space management, staying organized. And a number of the children at our school have executive functioning challenges, how to stay organized, where to start a project, and then staying with the project until it is completed. Any questions so far? Now, autism spectrum disorder. In 2013, autism spectrum disorder was defined as a combination of different autistic disorders and challenges. But what's interesting is that 1 in 54 children, to the estimate of Autism Speaks website, have this challenge. From our standpoint, more of our focus, or more of our customers or clients, which are the families, the children have or are on the autism spectrum. Most of the children we deal with are what were called Asperger's, and that term is still okay to use, even though it's really part of this autism spectrum disorder broad umbrella definition. Challenges, what you've probably heard, in social skills, eye contact, ability to carry on a conversation. A number of these kids have repetitive behaviors. Some will do what's called flapping or rocking, and repetitive speech, certain phrases they like to use a lot. And then when it comes to nonverbal communication, they have challenges in showing sometimes the right facial expressions, keeping their distance to an appropriate, or not being too close or too far away when in a social situation. But there are therapies to help these kids with these types of challenges. And most of these kids, at least the ones with Asperger's, are very bright. They have a large vocabulary, and yet they struggle because in a lot of cases they like to be loners or to have solitude. Now, when it comes to autism, it's called a developmental disability. So it's really important to try to catch it early so that services can be provided early. And in the first 24 months, if possible, it'd be great to be able to diagnose a child with autism so they can start to get the types of services that they need. And you can see there some of the signs of a toddler with autism. And now when parents go and take their children to the child well care checkups, pediatricians are checking at various intervals for these signs to help parents identify a problem before it goes on too long. It can be diagnosed as early as 18 months. A great site, if you have friends or family members, is Autism Speaks, if you need that. The other site that's very good is called Understood, and that's for children with learning disabilities and families that have children with learning disabilities and teachers. It's a great website that gives you information on apps that you can use for your children, on phones, on computers, for example. They also have some tools to note what's going on so you can help determine if your child has a challenge. So you can take note of that, observe it, and report it to teachers, and then try to get things rolling if you need to have a child evaluated. Asperger's syndrome, more on the higher end of the spectrum, still difficulty with social interactions, a lot of restricted interests, but intense interests. We have kids that know all the flags of the world, one boy, another one all the capitals of the world, another one that studied all the area maps in Tampa that could tell his mom how to get from place A to place B if the traffic was bad. I mean, it's amazing what these kids can do. They're just incredible. And then their strengths, their focus and persistence, attention to detail, and aptitude for recognizing patterns. I was in a Zoom the other day with a math teacher. We were teaching math to some junior high kids. We're going through the process, and this one boy that's on the spectrum, we asked, so what is the pattern here? We're considering one option as a pattern. He came up with a whole different option that neither the math teacher nor I saw. and yet it was valid and it was very creative. And we just sat there and we said it out loud. Wow, that's something. They do. A lot of these kids have a desire for sameness, and maybe you've heard that when it comes to transitioning, that's not always easy for them. When you have to go from one type of situation to the next. That's why if something happens out of the ordinary, that can be almost devastating because they're not expecting it, they're not ready for it. And, you know, like a fire drill, if they're not warned about the fire drill, that could cause a problem. Other challenges, some of these kids, noise and sounds, they need to know when a fire drill is coming. They'll cover their ears. If the lights are too intense, they'll want it darker. You try to have a conversation with give and take. They don't always understand if there's a joke involved, what's going on, you know, but they try. And sometimes they need help with learning how to not only keep distance with the social skills class, but also on their tone and the loudness of their voice so that it's more appropriate. A lot of these kids can benefit from social skills and other types of classes for them and certain kinds of therapies that help them be less anxious. A number of the kids have anxiety and some have depression. The two that I'm thinking of in particular, high achievers, but also because of that, that was what they wanted. They were perfectionists. And it took a while for them not to lose it if they missed something on a test. One girl, she would become very upset, and she learned how to handle that before going on to high school. And then another boy, it was interesting, he wanted to be perfect no matter what. So if he thought he was missing a problem on a test, it was okay, I'm going to blow it all the way so that I get 100% the other way. And I'm going to miss them all, but I'll be 100% on what I wanted. You know, I wanted to get them all one way or the other. Throughout all these types of challenges, you see that these kids go through, their families are there supporting them. They have speech therapists, occupational therapists. This is a long haul for these families. And, you know, our goal, and I think the goal for all families, is that your child will be self-sufficient someday. And that's our goal. Some are able to go to college, some will never go to college. Some need to go to a trade school. And their main concern, I know for a number of parents, is what happens to my child when I pass, because I want them to have options. Now, a question for Diane, I don't know if that is even something, because you do planning for people as they get older. Do you do planning for something like this? You know, is that even a possibility? You know, thoughts that if you're going to get older and you might need help, you know what I'm saying? How would that impact their child and things like that? So, you know, that just came to me as I see you sitting there. But, you know, planning for the future. We have to plan for these kids so that they can keep on living, even if I go into a nursing home, even if I do this, even if I pass, you know. Now, luckily, a lot of families have siblings that can help. Some don't, though. So I guess that's a question to ponder, Diane. Maybe it's something that we can have you present to parents as a thought. All right, so that's that. What to do if you're concerned? I would say really consider having a child evaluated. If you have some friends that are saying they're having a hard time, their child is having a hard time learning, they can have the child evaluated privately or in the school system. Now, when they ask the school system, the school might try what's called response to intervention techniques. If they think a child has dyslexia, they're going to try some techniques first to see if that resolves it before doing a whole assessment. If they do an assessment and they come up with a diagnosis, well, they don't diagnose, but if they see that there are problems, then they may create what's called an individualized education plan, or IEP, and that's a legal plan that helps the family, it helps the school, It's, in my opinion, all good. It gives ideas on how to catch that student up and help them achieve in the classroom environment. What kind of special education do they need? What type of accommodations do they need? And it helps them in terms of not only at school support, but also helps their doctors that they're working with. It helps the therapists that they're working with if they're all working towards a common goal. And the good thing about the testing is that it can help reduce the stress of the child going to school because they understand why they're having difficulty, and that it's okay. And it can definitely reduce the stress for a parent because now we have a plan on the types of things, the types of goals that we're going to work on for the next year to help our child out. So, you know, some want to do it in a private setting, some want to do it in a public setting. So it really depends on what you would prefer. Now, there are state scholarships for children with special needs, and Florida was one of the first, and I have to hand it to Florida. We came up with the McKay Scholarship Program for students with disabilities grades K through 12. So if you have an IEP, you have a child with a diagnosed disability or a 504 accommodation plan, which isn't quite as extensive, and you're not happy with the way your child is progressing, you can basically take a certain number of dollars and take those and go into another public school, a charter school, or a private school. And the average amount last year for this scholarship was $8,473. So it's basically a parent choice initiative. It's to say, I'm not happy. I'll give the state notice that I'm considering taking the McKay. You don't have to take it, but if you do, based on how your child's been assessed, you're given a matrix number, and with that matrix number, so many dollars flows. So a number of our students that come to our school have a McKay scholarship that goes with them. That helps pay their tuition and fees. It doesn't cover the whole cost, and that's where we go out to get monies either from the family, either they make up the difference, but a lot can't, so then we go and get do some charity fundraisers like the golf tournament, tennis tournament, gala, or we just go to some people that like to donate to help with scholarships. The Gardner program came out after the McKay, and it's for certain disabilities, kids with certain specific disabilities like autism spectrum disorder, muscular dystrophy. You'll see the list there down at the bottom. And it actually has a higher amount, and it's more of a menu approach where parents can take the amount and apply it even to private tutoring, to special therapies, instructional materials. It gives them more flexibility on how to spend the money to help their child. So this has become very popular, goes all the way up through age 22 to help the children or people by that age, adults with disabilities. And this is a very popular scholarship program also in Florida. And then finally, even though it's not designed for children with special needs, there is a Florida tax credit scholarship program which encourages families who are from lower income environments and they think that their child deserves a better education to seek out a different school. So if their child also has learning challenges, then they could, for example, come to a Morning Star school, bring their tuition, and then be educated at our school. So for our standpoint, most of our scholarships are McKay and Gardner, and then we will have a couple of these that are the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship Program. I love Florida for the choice. I love the ability that parents have a choice. I think it's great. But I also know, and I love the presentation last week by Addison. I believe strongly in public schools. I just think there's so much need out there that we all have plenty of work to do. Let's see. All right, what do we do best? This is my ad, and I guess I'm not supposed to give an ad. I read later as part of my presentation, but we'll do it real fast. We meet students where they are. They come in a lot of cases where they have low self-esteem. We'll start them a little under where they are so they build confidence. we focus on quality rather than quantity of work, teaching them the work habits, values, social skills. We have a number of therapists that work with us, occupational therapists, speech therapists. We have some students that are ABA therapists that actually come on campus with their students. So whatever the family needs, we'll try to accommodate so that their child will get the type of education that they need. And we are, I think, a close partner with parents and caregivers. We only have 75 kids, so our class sizes are small. This is what we expect, and this is what we try to drill into the children. Be prepared when you come to school. You need to have that homework done and be ready to go. Be responsible, which means following directions, basically, and then always be respectful. If this doesn't happen, then they get what's called a pink slip, and we have a discussion about it. But there's always a do-over. We recognize that our kids will have instances where they make a, I guess I'll call it a mistake, but they just need to learn how to do things differently. And sometimes they need a break. So we've added a sensory room so they can just say, I'm stressed out, I need to go take a break for a while. Here are our wonderful teachers. We're not a big school. We have small classes of about 10 kids from elementary, junior high age. They love to learn by doing, hands-on, whether it's science or art. We do a lot of activities outside, given the current environment. And where do our graduates go? You'll see the two photos, one on the right and far left, are kids that have gone to Bishop McLaughlin. And then Thomas, who has a brother still at Morningstar, he's at Center Academy for high school, another special education type school, private school. We have Emily, who graduated from the University of North Florida, is working now with one of the major health providers in Jacksonville. Kyle Paul, who graduated a few years ago and said that the Air Force is his home. He loves being in the Air Force. And then Arielle Burgos, who I think it was last year, was the prom queen, is that what you call it, at Tampa Catholic? I'm not sure what you call that. But so she went to Tampa Catholic, and I believe this is her senior year there. In terms of resources, Understood is great. If you have any friends whose kids are facing challenges with learning, they should go check out understood.org. A wealth of information, different tools to look at. They have apps of what you can do to help the kids can use to be organized, to learn all sorts of different types of schools. Learning Disabilities Association of America was one before Understood came around. And I think it's more, I would say maybe more research-based. Autism Speaks, I'm sure you've heard of them. And then National Institutes of Health and National Institute of Mental Health also have a lot of great facts. And then the Florida Department of Education regarding the scholarship programs. So that's basically it. We've been educating kids for over 60 years. And we're proud of what we do, and we can't wait till things get back to normal. And we're all back on campus again. That will be great, because we do have a number of kids, because of their health concerns, are learning still from home. Any questions? I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Sure.
Yes, that was excellent. Is there, I know this really came up when Addison spoke, and you do have some children that are still having to learn virtually. Is that a challenge for the learning disabled children to try to coach them?
In some cases, it is quite a big challenge. So we may have to do interventions with extra Zoom sessions during the week. A lot of good communication with the parents. Most parents are very supportive, and they do put in a lot of time. When this situation's going on. In fact, there was a study by Understood that said during this distance learning environment, 69% of parents have said they've learned a lot more about some of the challenges that their children face from a learning standpoint, because they're learning 10 feet away from them at home, and they see some of the challenges that they're struggling with. in terms of like a learning disability. But yes, we do have challenges, and that's why I think it'll be great to get everyone back on campus, because there are great benefits to that for everyone being on campus. I think the studies prove that.
Yeah, it sounds like, especially with the hands-on that you guys provide with the smaller classes, that makes a big difference too.
It does.
Yes, because the students get a lot more attention. I have a, well, let's see, my brother's wife's sister has a child that's autistic, and I remember when he's 21, but going to Disney with them, and we really had such a difficult time with him. We had to restrain him. We had to put him in a chair and restrain him because he couldn't control himself. And they had a rough time with him, and they actually put him in a special. They're in Baltimore, but they put him in a special school up there,
Hmm.
and he's doing so well now. He got a scholarship, and he's at the University of Maryland.
How
Um,
often is that? See, those are the kind of success stories that are just great. You know, that's great.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing because I think about that sometimes when I see Kyle, I'm like, I remember when he was little and I couldn't even understand what he was saying sometimes because he was always moving so fast and talking so fast. Now I can understand him because he's so brilliant that he's so far ahead of us.
Yes, yes. I will say some of these kids are phenomenal in terms of what they can do.
Yes, it's heartwarming and it's beautiful work that you guys are doing. Um,
Well,
it's
thank you.
phenomenal, really.
Well, thanks, and thanks for this opportunity. I mean, it's always good to share news so that you know about another resource in the community.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a comment that might turn into a question. I haven't evolved it all the way yet.
Okay.
But I volunteer at the Strass Center.
Hmm.
Not very much this year because there's nothing going on there. But last year we took a training class on this kind of stuff because the Strass Center decided that for the big shows, particularly the ones in Morsani, the Broadway shows, they have certain of their scheduled shows are so that people with these kind of disabilities can attend the shows and not have to worry about disrupting other people in the show because it's going to happen. And so we had to learn how to respond to that and how to react when, with the flashing lights or the fog. Some of the shows have fog, and that causes problems for some people. And what the guy said that was really interesting was, for decades, you and the people you work with have been focusing on helping these kids, but we forgot to pay attention to the fact that these kids grow up and they don't want to go see Beauty and the Beast anymore. They want to go see Hamilton. And what are we doing as a community to help these kids or these grown-ups be able to feel comfortable in these kind of settings? So I learned that the Strass Center is doing it, but I guess my question is, what else are we doing? Because I don't have any kids or relatives with these kind of things. I wouldn't know any of this without having taken that class or listening to you. So how are we learning about how to help and be more accommodating?
Well, I think that's interesting. My daughter works for a group called the National Diversity Council. So what they do is they interface with HR people in a lot of big companies to share about people with different backgrounds, let's put it that way. And one of those is people with disabilities. And she says, Dad, I want you to know, these kids that are now growing up that have these disabilities, and she was speaking about autism, things like that, they're becoming a hot commodity. I mean, because companies they know that they're hard workers. They know that if you give them a task, in a lot of cases, if anything, they'll overwork. They won't underwork.
Mm-hmm.
But that's from a work standpoint, which is good for parents that want to be sure that when they leave, their child will have some way to survive. Now, Publix locally always does a good job that we found of some of our graduates who need, a job and aren't the ones necessarily that are going to go to college, that they can hold down, whether it's being a bagger or a person that helps at Publix. They've been so responsible about doing things like that. So I think the environment is opening up. I did not know about the stress. That is exciting to me to know that they're offering that, because that is something that surely we could advertise and, you know, let folks know about, let the parents know. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, Morsani's not open yet, but when it does,
Hopefully soon, right? Yeah, a year or so, or within a year,
hopefully.
for sure.
So that's good that there's businesses and corporations that are paying attention to these people that are so valuable, and we've forgotten about them for years because nobody told us.
Yeah.
So,
it is,
and
it is.
I think, oh, can you learn to have a problem with dysgraphia? Because I think I do. I used to be able to write really well, and now I can't.
Well, you know, I don't know. Let me research that one for you. You haven't had a traumatic brain injury or anything in the recent days?
Not that I can recall.
Okay, all right.
I'm the same way, Diane. I used to be able to write novels, and now it takes me forever. I'm the same way.
No, it's just my handwriting is just pathetic. And I look back on old stuff I used to write 10 and 20 years ago. I'm like, oh, look how neatly I used to write this stuff. Well, who is this person?
I think that's just part of the process.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, because I'm the same way. I write like a doctor now, and I'm like, I used to have this beautiful handwriting. Everyone would want me to write on the chalkboard, and now I read my writing.
But we write less and less too, because we're typing, you know, instead of writing. And like cursive is a thing of the past. I'm not even teaching cursive hardly anymore. So,
Right.
Forgive me if I already asked this or if you already covered it. What's the grades that you guys?
We go from what you would call first grade through junior high. For the lower levels, we get rid of the term first grade, second grade, third grade. We call it primary and prep. And then when they go to junior high, we bring them back into the normal terminology of junior high. But because they are grouped by age and capability, we don't want them thinking, oh, I should be in third grade, but I'm really in second grade, or I'm really supposed to be in fourth grade and they've got me in third grade. So we have primary 2, we have prep, and then we have junior high.
Okay.
And so once they're in junior high, we're saying we're getting ready to send you. So get ready.
I have a question, Paul.
Yes.
Is there any affiliation with the church? And not that it matters, but I just noticed your sign says Morning Star School, but your membership to CABA says Morning Star Catholic School. So I wondered if there was any criteria in any of the children getting into your school.
That is a great question, and I thank you for asking. The only criteria is if we think we can help them.
Perfect.
So what's beautiful is that our principal is very spiritual. And if she can help a child, she'll help a child. And I said, well, how are we going to pay for this? Oh, we'll figure out a way. Don't worry about it, you know? And so that's why the fundraising is so important. But right now, in terms of statistics, 40% of our families are non-Catholic, 60% are Catholic. And then, you know, we've had every type of background. And what's beautiful about that is we've had a child who's Muslim, we've had Mormon, we've had everything. And the great thing is the kids get to learn about all that.
Awesome.
You know, they get what I'll call, in a way, a liberal arts education. You know, so I think it's very cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's
Thank
really,
you.
you're welcome. It's really if we can help them.